In this video, we're going to cover how to make an assignment of your CALIA Compliant Services member inside your PowerDMS assessment. And in fact, what we're going to do as we talk through the instructions, I'm going to recommend that you use groups to do this. It's not required, but we'll talk through how to use a group to make that assignment. And that's going to make it easier year after year to assign future CALIA Compliance Services members or CSMs. If you ever have any questions on the assignment, there is some help under the PowerDMS help and success community, or please reach out to PowerDMS support through their email or the phone number. I'm going to navigate away from this PowerPoint and we'll go to the Sandbox site. At about 30-ish days prior to your web-based assessment, the CALIA CSMs will make contact with you. Typically, that's going to be through email, might be through phone call, but they'll reach out and you'll have their information. CALIA CSMs and assessors do not have access to your PowerDMS site until you give them permissions to access. And those permissions are done by setting up a user profile for them. So first thing I want to do is when I get the CSM's name and email, I'm going to set them up as a user. But I mentioned the use of groups. So before we create the CSM as a user, let's go to New and create a group first. If you hover over New and you do not have permission to create users and groups, you may need to get with a PowerDMS administrator from within your organization to assist you to do this or to grant you the permissions to do it. So hovering over New and going to Group, and I'm just going to title the group CALIA CSM, and I'm going to click Create. Currently, I don't have my CSM profile created yet, so I don't know who that is to put in this group, but the group is created. And now my CSM has reached out to me. I have their information and I'm going to click New User. It's possible you may have more than one CSM, so you may have to do this twice, but let's just start by doing, I already started to fill out some information here. So I'm going to call my person Susie Kalia, give this person a username, something that is normal for your organization, maybe first initial last name dot last name, totally up to you how you want to do that. For the purposes of this demonstration, I'm just going to use my email. You can do one of two things. In my site right now, the send welcome email is checked by default. That's an administrative setting. So if I were to click save, Susie, the CSM, would receive an email from PowerDMS prompting her to set her password up. But you might be setting your CSM up a couple of days ahead of time. And maybe you don't want them to have access to your site as of yet. You don't want them to be able to log in. So if I uncheck the send welcome email, I can now just set a temporary password. So let me do that. Hovering in here tells me minimally what I need to have. All right. The other thing you may want to do is provide a job title. So I already have it in here as Kalia CSM. If you did not have a job title, I could type that in there and press enter and it would generate that on the fly. That way, in the history of your site, if you come across, and who was Susie Kalia? Oh yeah, she was our CSM 2 years ago. Um, what you can do, you do not need to do this. You can go ahead and pre-populate an end date. So on this date, this user profile will go ahead and archive. You don't have to remember to come back in and archive this user's profile. Or you can just, whenever the review is done, the web-based assessment is done, you can come in here and archive this profile. So you know when it's going to start, you know what the time frame is. Perhaps, give it a few days after that and go ahead and populate an end date. The password end date is this password, as soon as I click save, it's going to already expire. So go ahead and let me click save. That's because I gave it a generic password. And upon the first time that Susie tries to log in, it shows that it's expired now, it's going to force, that's what forces her to reset her password. So you don't have to become a password manager. Just choose something generic for your organization. And every time that you set a new user up, you can give them this exact same password for their first login. It's not going to stay there. They're going to have to be forced to reset their password upon their first login. So now, because I already created my group, and whether you create a CSM group or not, I would recommend that you go to the membership tab. And sometimes PowerDMS is set up so that it's going to auto assign new users to certain groups, such as an all user group. Well, I don't necessarily need my CSM to be a member of my all users group. If you use documents and assign that to all users, I don't need those documents to populate to the CSM's inbox. So I'm going to remove her from any auto assigned groups, but I want to assign her to the CSM group. So I've got the Kalia CSM group, select add, and then save. So over time, when you're managing or creating additional CSMs in the future, all you're going to have to do is put them in the group, and we're going to assign the group to your assessment. So in the future, that's going to make the assignment really easy to manage. I've got my assessment bookmarked, so I'm going to navigate to my assessment. Once I go to the assessment, now I need to give the CSM the appropriate assignments and permissions. No other permissions are required at the group level or the individual user level. No elevated permissions, administrative permissions, things like that. So I'm going to go to the assignment tab. I'm at the root of my menu. I'm going to assign them to every standard within the assessment, and I click Add New Assignment, again, using the group to start Kalia CSM, and they need to be assigned to the Kalia Compliance Services member with the role or responsibility of participate, and select Save. You're always going to need at least 2 assignments, maybe more. So I'm going to add new assignment. I'm going to choose the CSM group again. Now, Susie is a member of this group. So essentially, we are assigning Susie to this assessment by this group assignment. I also need to assign to the role or roles that your attachments are in. In this assessment, I've just been using the manager role, so the CSM needs to have observe responsibility of the manager role. If they do not, any attachments that are in that role, they're not going to see. If you utilize more than one role, such as team or auxiliary, and you have attachments in those roles that the CSM is going to need to see to verify compliance, then you might need to add an additional assignment of CALIA CSM to the role of, say, for instance, accreditation team with the responsibility of observe, or else they're not going to see the attachments in those roles. So just these 2 assignments. So when Susie expires in May, in auto archives, and say a year from now you're getting ready for another web-based assessment, the CSM reaches out, says, and you know what their first name, last name, and email is. You assign them, you put them in the group. As soon as you put them in the group, they're automatically assigned to your assessment with the appropriate permissions, instead of having to make those assignments year after year and add and delete and things like that. With the credentials that you're going to provide to Susie is her username, which in this case is first initial last name, her temporary password, and she's also going to need your site key or site ID. If you're unsure what that is, hover over your name, welcome, in the upper right hand corner, and you'll see it in that drop down box. This is in this site, it's C Sand. All right, so I'm going to navigate away, and this is where the CSMs can change the sites. That's why they need your site key. Right, I'm going to put in, Susie's going to go ahead and log in with the username that you provided and the temporary password. As first thing, it's going to prompt me to reset my password. Again, that temporary password is just something generic that you provided, and it's going to force Susie to reset the password. So you don't have to become a password manager and you don't know what the password is. I can send the verification email or I can just continue to Power DMS. Okay, let me move this over a little bit. I'm assigned to the assessment. I've got some to-dos. I can navigate to the assessment, whichever way I'm most comfortable with. I'm just going to click on that link. It takes me right to the assessment, and I can see over to the right that I'm assigned to the CALIA Services CSM role, as well as the Accreditation Manager role. And that allows me to see the attachments that are in the Accreditation Manager role. If you're ever unsure or cautious about not wanting your CSM to see too much, go ahead and log in with that temporary password before you provide it to them. You can't do anything in that role without the unlock key, and that's provided to the CSMs from a CALIA administrator, not from PowerDMS and not from within your organization. So it's safe. It's basically like a view only or a read only at this point. You can't do anything without that key. You want to make sure that they have their appropriate assignments, that they can see attachments. But for instance, if you had mock notes in there, you might want to ensure that they don't see the mock notes. If you were using the auxiliary role or the team role, and if you don't want them to see those attachments, you can see I'm not going to see those. I'm only seeing what's in the manager role. On the contrary, if you need the CSM to see the attachments that are in the team role, this is a good way to see exactly what they see and what they don't see. So feel free to log in and test it if you're ever unsure. Why it's super important to see that role or for them to have observe rights of that role. If I were to take away the accreditation manager observe rights just by removing it, I'm just using two different browsers here to do this. I'm just going to refresh. You can, and so now I'm only assigned to the CALIA Compliance Services members role. If I go to attachments, I don't see any attachments. And that's probably the most common error that we see is an agency will assign them to participate as a CSM and then stop there. They need at least that one additional assignment to observe the role or the roles that the attachments are in. So let me just add that back. Again, manager, observe. I'll refresh over here. I now see two roles. And if I go to the attachments tab, I can see all of the attachments here. So quick and easy. Making the assignment to the group is probably the easiest to maintain and manage over and over again. But if I don't want to use a group, let me bring back my administrative screen. If I don't want to use a group, I can remove these assignments and I can make the assignment to Susie herself as the CSM, CALIA Compliance Services member, participate, save, add new assignment, Susie CSM, and we're going to make sure that she can observe minimally the accreditation manager role. Same thing, she now has all of the appropriate assignments. Again, if you ever have any questions, reach out to PowerDMS support, or there are some resources within the success community as well.